We picked it up yesterday in Psalm chapter 4. We just laid the groundwork that David is in distress with his son Absalom basically engaged in a hostile takeover, trying to usurp the throne. And so David is writing a psalm, really two, Psalm 3 and 4, they go together. And David is crying out to God to vindicate, to deliver him. And we left it here that often in life, the narrative goes against us. This can happen in your employment. This can happen in your family. This can happen in a number of different situations where our world is very competitive and comparative, and it's dog-eat-dog, backstabbing kind of environments. And someone can step on you, trample you, slander you, write a story about you that isn't true, and anything that sells, anything that gets them ahead, anything that lets them win over you is permissible. But when you're in the receiving chair of that, and it hurts even more deeply when it's among Christians, or when it's from family or former friends or people that you thought loved you, it hurts even more. And that's what David is experiencing. He's experiencing a hostile takeover. He's dealt with a lot of enemies, but this time it's his own son. It's someone he loved. And there's lies and slander and threats, death threats. David's had to run for his life with his family. And he can't even go into his own home because he's not safe. And so he's reaching up and he's crying out to God for vindication. So from that place, let's see what David says. Verse 1, "Hear me when I call, O God." So this is a desperation. This is, God, I really need you to listen to me right now. I really need you to respond to me right now. And it's a desperate place to be, but it's not a bad place to be, okay? Because we all need God. And the good news is he always hears when we call. So this isn't a question of whether God will hear. It's David saying, God, I need to know that you're hearing me, and I need to know that you're responding, and I need to see you come through in this situation in which I have no power. I really need you to help. And then he calls God, O God of my righteousness. Now I want you to notice something. God is righteous, and he could have called him a righteous God. But he says, O God of my righteousness. And what this is beautiful. It's the gospel. It's David saying, I know I'm not righteous in and of myself. If I have any righteousness, it's because God has conferred it upon me and then produced it within me. God, you're the source of my righteousness. And my friend, that's why Jesus came. He came to be the source of your righteousness. You can't be righteous enough to save yourself or to get to God or have a relationship with him, but God wants to make you righteous based on your faith in Jesus because Jesus is righteous. He wants to grant you all the righteousness of Christ positionally, judicially. He wants to exonerate you and place upon you the innocence that Jesus had. But then he wants to lead you forward in that righteousness. He wants you to live out of it. He wants you to live and learn how to live innocently. And what David is really implying here is that he was not perfect, but he was attempting to live out of the righteousness God gave him. And that in this particular situation, he is being handled unjustly, okay? He did not do anything that deserved this kind of criminal treatment, okay? So God of my righteousness, God, you're the source of my righteousness. It's a salvation statement. It's a sanctification statement. If there's any righteousness in me, any good thing, it's God. It's God for me and in me and through me. It's God working in spite of me. So God of my righteousness, please hear me. I'm going to cry out to you right now. Thou hast enlarged me when I was in distress. To enlarge is to expand and bring into wide open space, okay? It's the idea of being, it's a contrast. I'll tell you that. Enlarge me when I was in distress. The word that he uses for distress is a word that talks about being in a tight place, okay? Being backed into a corner. So I want you to think physically, David, his enemies have pressed him into a tight place, but it's not the first time it's ever happened to him. The same thing happened with Saul when he was much younger. He's been pressed. He's been backed into a corner before. And he says, God, you intervened and let me run in wide open spaces. So think about this. When David was running from Saul, he had to hide into a cave, right? He had to be backed into a tight space. Once the battle was over, Saul was dead, David was anointed king. David was free. David was released to be in his home again, in his nation again, and in the wide open spaces again, vulnerable. The idea here is safe and vulnerable. God, you've made me safe and vulnerable in wide open places when I was previously backed into tight corners. You've made me safe and flourishing and healthy and at rest. You know, when you're walking in a field, not far from where I live, there's a farm, and it's a walking area. People go walk their dogs. It's a wide open field, and it's an open space. And they don't do that unless they feel safe, because they are vulnerable. I mean, someone could pick them off from the woods. Somebody, an animal could attack them. I mean, lots of things could happen when you're in a wide open space. So to be in that wide open space, you have to feel safe, right? And that's what David is saying. God, you've made me safe, flourishing, protected, and free to live my life before when I was in distress. So now he says, have mercy upon me and hear my prayer. God, once again, I need you to come through for me. I need you to show me your mercy again. I need you to hear my prayer. I'm in trouble, God, and I can't get myself out. So please hear me. You've been true and faithful and loving. You've rescued me before, and I need you to rescue me again. So let me just leave it there for today, and let me encourage you, my friend. If you feel like you're backed into a tight space, spiritually, emotionally, psychologically, financially, physically, your health. I have some friends right now going through very deep waters of health battles, and they're backed into a tight place. Grief, sorrow. If you feel like there's betrayal unfolding in your life by those that you thought loved you, maybe you've lost a close friend, or maybe a family member, someone that you very much loved and had a big heart for has somehow rejected or turned their back on you. Maybe circumstances are unfolding in your life that just make you feel pressed in and held hostage, in bondage. Look up and call out, okay? This psalm is going to end with David rejoicing, glad, and sleeping peacefully. But where does it start? It starts with a prayer. It starts with David saying, I am really struggling. I am really having a hard time. And God, I need you to help me right now. So my friend, look up and call out. And the God who's enlarged you before, the God that's released you before, he will give you rest right now. And soon enough, he'll release you again. Have a great Thursday, and I will see you tomorrow.